Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to part 18 of my Joseph Losey season. Today we're going to go all the way back to 1968, and boom, with the exclamation mark. This stars Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, Noel Coward, and Joanne Shinkus, who would become the wife of Sidney Poitier. This was written by Tennessee Williams, based on his play. He also did the screenplay, and he once said that this was the greatest film adapted from his work. This film went through a lot of titles, one of which was The Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore, which is almost as good as Boom. And Boom was without the exclamation mark at one point, but then the marketing team obviously decided to add the exclamation mark for extra boom. This was a box office bomb, just kind of apt for the title, and a critical bomb. Obviously Burton and Taylor's private life perhaps has overshadowed their working career. Certainly after this was pretty much the first collaboration from them that was an absolute disaster. Nobody understood it. The play originally featured Tab Hunter and Tallulah Bankhead. It may have meant to have been a comedy, but because Joseph Losey isn't that well known for his sense of humour, you do feel this isn't supposed to be a comedy, but the performances are so bizarre that it is questionable what the intention of the film was. I was actually dreading watching this just because of its reputation, but I have to say this has been an exercise in not judging a film by what the reviews of the film are, because personally I thought this was a masterpiece, which might be as much of a shock as when you actually watch the film. Now, I will say this is a divisive film as far as a polarising film. It's a film that you're probably going to either absolutely hate, which is what just about everybody has done, or it's going to be a fascinating misfire that you could watch over and over again. I mean, it's directed by Losey, Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, the music's by John Barry, the script's by Tennessee Williams. What could go wrong? Well, Dirk Bogarde, for example, said that once Losey got into this glamorous life of being friends with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, who would make more films with, he kind of lost his perspective perhaps. Now, allegedly the stories are that Burton and Taylor on the set would pretty much have Bloody Marys for their breakfast, and I don't know whether Joseph Losey joined them, because the film is strange, it's bizarre, but it's also quite wonderful. Richard MacDonald, who did the production design on lots of Losey films, I don't know whether he was drinking Bloody Marys as well, because the production design and the art, which always appears in Joseph Losey films, is unbelievable. It's off the charts. The set on this Mediterranean island, again, whether it speaks to the drinking of Taylor and Burton, but they wanted to actually buy the house, even though the house was a set, it had no ceilings, but they still wanted to buy it anyway. Again, whether that's an urban myth or whether that's true that they were so blotto during most of the shooting that they actually thought the house was real, even though it had no ceilings. But the production design, as I say, the artwork is just mind-blowing. Losey does, camera tricks in the inside of a minor bird cage. He does quick zooms into the eyes, a la Sergio Leone. But Elizabeth Taylor's performance is just completely off the charts. I've never been a huge Elizabeth Taylor fan, and this performance is just... it's kind of reductory to call it nuts or insane, but it's pretty much nuts and insane. This Shout Factory edition, which I would highly recommend because it looks absolutely gorgeous. Some of Losey's shot compositions are just stunning. There's a commentary with John Waters, which I would highly recommend you listen to. It's hilarious. John Waters is one of the few big proponents of this film, and he describes Elizabeth Taylor's performance as a female impersonator performance. Or he describes her performance as if a linebacker dressed as Elizabeth Taylor is doing the performance. It is off the charts. There's a scene during the night where she's describing the death of one of her husbands. Now this is a person who has microphones into all her her staff's rooms, so when she's just rants in the middle of the night they can all hear it, much to hilarious effect. Again, the fascinating thing about this film is, was this supposed to be like a serious film, or was it supposed to be funny? Because it is bizarrely funny. There's another one where she's having a coughing fit, which is just ridiculous, and you do kind of go, is this the same person who won like Oscars? But it's also genius at the same time. I haven't even mentioned the synopsis of the film because it's almost secondary. But Elizabeth Taylor plays this person called Flora, or Sissy Goforth. If that's not a female impersonator's name, I don't know what is. And she is writing her memoirs in this kind of Xanadu-esque house that she has in the Mediterranean. Again, there's actually parallels between this and Citizen Kane, as much as Citizen Kane is perhaps a look at Orson Welles' life. You could read Boom as actually a look at Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor's lives. You could argue maybe they're just playing themselves. Anyway, she lives in seclusion in this palace essentially, and she has Blackie, played by Joanna Shinkus, as her PA. She has Rudy, who keeps the guard dogs, etc. She has lots of staff that there's a language barrier with, so she just shouts at them a lot. Again, this is a film that, if you said I absolutely hate this film, I would perfectly understand. Elizabeth Taylor's character is not very endearing whatsoever. But again, you just kind of stand back and take it all in. And Richard Burton plays a struggling poet. As John Waters says on the commentary track, she's too young for the role and he's too old for his role. So again, it doesn't really work. But again, the idea on paper sounds amazing. Burton, Taylor, Losey, Barry, Tennessee Williams, Noel Coward, it sounds amazing. And he has met her in the past, just briefly. She doesn't really remember him. And he turns up on the island, which is funny in itself as a method of transport. And he has this reputation, as Noel Coward tells her. He has the nickname of the Angel of Death because he seems to find his way into the homes of rich, older people, and they seem to die shortly after meeting him. And that's kind of the setup, sort of, if there even is a setup. Noel Coward plays the Witch of Capri, who is just this kind of information centre gossip kind of person, who apparently Katharine Hepburn was offered the role, and she was insulted and offended that she was offered the role. But Noel Coward does Noel Coward things. He's brought up from the boat up to the facility, riding the shoulders of a sailor. There's an amazing dinner scene with him and Elizabeth Taylor, when she's got this ridiculous headdress on, but it's an absolutely brilliant scene. I mean, the film is about, you know, the creative process. It's about dealing with your own mortality. He said, desperately trying to clutching at straws and making sense of it. Again, it's one of those films that you certainly won't forget watching it, whether you think it's an absolute train wreck or whether you like it. You're certainly not going to forget it. I mean, there's plenty of films that are bad that are just instantly forgettable, and that's almost the worst sin. Boom is definitely not forgettable. I mean, I do have to agree with John Waters. There's something fabulous about it. I think, you know, it's certainly a selective audience, but I would say it's vaulted its way into my top 5 Joseph Losey films. I can't believe I'm saying that. Because it's just so strange. As John Waters says, you know, what did Losey say after one of the takes? Or did they all just burst out laughing after one of the takes? Are they being serious when they're making this? Again, Joseph Losey, if you look at his career, you know, he tried something different with Modesty Blaise, and again, that didn't really work, because Joseph Losey's sense of humour isn't what he's famous for. Or is this an earnest kind of vanity project where they're trying to make this serious work of art, but you've got Elizabeth Taylor just drunk and out of her mind for most of it, and Richard Burton, who walks about with a samurai robe and a samurai sword on for most of the film. He's actually quite restrained, but he's also a little bit glassy-eyed, perhaps. It's just an astonishing film. It's 113 minutes, but it does actually fly by. I mean, I know some people might find it slow, but the production design is so gorgeous. And again, as I said, Losey's compositions are immaculate. It's arguably one of his best looking films as far as compositions. I mean, there's a wonderful shot where you have like a dog in the foreground, one of Rudy, the kind of bodyguard's dog, who is a little person, just for added oddity as far as he's a bodyguard, but he's a little person. So you've got a dog in the foreground, you have these outrageous pieces of art, they have replica Easter Island statues in the background, you have the house, you have people. I mean, the placement of people within the frame, there's a low shot along the balcony outside the house, and Burton is in the distance in an alcove in a doorway, and you've got Taylor kind of mid, and then you've got Shinkus in another doorway in the back. I mean, it's immaculate compositions in the film. It might actually be his best looking film. But again, being very reductive and not very critical, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Again, what Losey's direction was, I've deliberately not read Losey's thoughts on the film from the book that I'm kind of reading through about Losey's career, because it's a complete mystery about what they were going for, what they thought they were going for, what they ended up with. I mean, what's in the film, is that the best takes that Elizabeth Taylor came up with? Because as I say, the coughing fit scene is just outrageous. Some of her line deliveries are hysterical. John Waters in the commentary track again talks about how much of an influence this film was on Divine and some of the quirks that Divine would use in some of Waters' films. If you look at the poster for Polyester and one of the original posters for Boom, it's pretty much identical. Again, for a casual film fan, this probably will be absolutely terrible. But for somebody who's fascinated with, you put all these great elements together and a film doesn't work, or a film comes out just completely bizarrely. As Waters says, what were they thinking when they saw the dailies? It's just, how did they think this was going to work? But that's the other odd thing about this film. There's so many just wonderful, really thought-provoking and philosophical lines of dialogue written by Williams, kind of inserted in between all the insanity. We're introduced to Elizabeth Taylor's character. She's face down, screaming, asking about pain injections. At one point she throws an X-ray machine off the cliff into the water. It's an experience, and that's kind of what you're after in a film. Again, for me at least, it's a perfect example of don't believe everything you read about a film or you've heard about a film, certainly good or bad, because you can go in thinking, oh, this is going to be great, and being not really understanding why everybody thinks it's great, and vice versa. But for me, this is sensational. Now, whether you have to be in the right mood for it, certainly you might have to have the right kind of sensibility for it, because as I say, if you watch this and you absolutely hate it, I wouldn't really be mad at that, because it's certainly not what we think of when we talk about great films. But as I said, I had a tremendous time with it. It's a fascinating misfire, if you like, but I actually think it's quite successful in whatever it was trying to do. And it's certainly different from the other Losey films, but again, that's what makes a filmmaker interesting. And again, maybe one of the reasons Losey isn't talked about amongst the great filmmakers is because he does have a lot of different kinds of films. And yes, there's kind of through lines through his work, as we've seen in the first 18 episodes of this series. I think there's 10 more to go, so buckle in, or buckle up. But this is an extraordinary piece of work in one way or another. As I said, this Shout Select, the print is wonderful. I mean, I was deliberating on whether just to pick up a DVD of it, but I'm glad I went that extra little bit and picked up the Shout Select, because again, playing on a 4K player, it really upscales this Blu-ray and it looks absolutely gorgeous. So this has a commentary with John Waters, which I would highly recommend. He's hilarious. And also has The Sound of a Bomb, contextualising Boom, with author and film critic Alfonso Duralde. And there's a trailer and there's photo galleries. So once again, this is a film that absolutely bombed in every way, shape or form. Losey did brag that he was the only person who ever lost money making a film with Burton and Taylor. Also, I don't think that was true further on in their career, but never mind. Yeah, it may have built up a cult, but it's a very small cult. But this is absolutely amazing, even though you may think it's amazing for other reasons than I do. So that's Boom, which is quite an experience. So please let me know in the comments what you think of Boom, and remember to pronounce the exclamation mark. So it's Boom, not just Boom. And hopefully you'll join me again for part 19, where Elizabeth Taylor makes a return to work with Joseph Losey. whether she had Bloody Marys to work with Joseph Losey the next time, I'm not quite sure. There is actually a scene where she seems to be drinking a Bloody Mary, but the glass is about that size, and she probably finished it. I mean, it does actually make an interesting double bill with Modesty Blaze. You can imagine that Dirk Bogart's villain kind of compound is actually just round the coast from Elizabeth Taylor's palatial estate with no ceilings. So thanks so much for watching. Like I say, hopefully you'll join me again for part 19. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, slightly exhausted, saying farewell.